I loved learning about infant development. My favorite was probably the development of depth perception, or perhaps the fear of heights. We are not born with it, but, if I recall correctly, we develop it within the first year or so. Scientists created a raised square platform. Half of the floor was wood and the other glass. The actual surface of the floor, 1 meter or so below, was white with red polka dots. At varying intervals of age, the babies would be brought in and placed on the wood end and encouraged to crawl to their moms, who were standing at the glass end of the platform. In early infancy, baby crawls over there without giving a shit. At some point though, they stop at the point where the wood meets the glass, or plexiglass maybe, showing that they recognize the difference in height and the fear of falling. Babies' brains are pretty fucking cool. I just recently heard of blindsightedness during one of my cognitive psychology classes. Basically, the area of the brain that processes what our eyes see is located at the back of the head, just where your skull starts to get smaller, towards your neck. Because of this, if you hit your head back there, quite often everything will go black for a moment before sight returns again. Sometimes though, following severe trauma to this area of the brain, like after falling off a ladder onto a curb or something, a person is never able to see again. For a long time it was assumed that the eyes were somehow incapable of seeing following the trauma, and that was why people were blind. However, it's been shown that it is just the processing of the images that is damaged. In other words, your eyes are still working away, viewing images, but your brain is unable to process the images, so you can't see them. Some experiments looking into this have found that people with damage to this area can still navigate around things in front of them without realizing they are doing it. So if you told someone with this damage to walk down a corridor and you placed obstacles in their way, they wouldn't be able to see the obstacles, but they could avoid bumping into them because their eyes are still able to view them and send signals to other areas of the brain to avoid knocking things. This is known as blindsightedness. Blew my little mind, tbh. The Three Christs of Ypsilanti. Psychologist forces 3 people who believe that they are Jesus Christ to live together. It does not go well. The psychologist, Milton Rokeach, had heard of a case where 2 women who believed that they were Mary, Mother of Christ, were forced to live together, and one of them broke free from their delusion. So he figured, 3 Christs, what would happen? They were angry at each other, often had physical fights. They eventually started getting along by avoiding the topic. He would ask them about the others, and each would say that the others were crazy. That they, of course, were the real Jesus. No cures. Some unethical stuff. Interesting though. One time I participated in a paid research experiment. I was basically tricked into thinking I was drunk. I was placed in a room with 2 other people and we were instructed to drink vodka with cranberry juice over a period of time while we socialized. After we drank, I was placed in a room where I had to read some flashing words on a computer. I felt pretty drunk at this point. When the researcher came back into the room, he gave me my car keys and said I was never actually given alcohol. He briefly told me that, because I was anticipating drinking for this experiment, that my brain had tricked me into feeling the effects of being intoxicated. I immediately snapped out of it and was completely amazed at how I felt. Mice were put on 2 sides of a wall with a door in. Only the right mouse could open the door. Slowly, they filled the left mouse's room with water, and eventually when right mouse saw them in danger, they opened the door. However, mice that had previously been on the left side and were now on the right, mice who had previously been wetted, opened the door considerably faster because they knew how unpleasant it was to be in the other scenario. Basically, mice have empathy. The monster experiment. Although it is horrible how they left the children with mental health issues at the end, this experiment gave very good insight to how to parent a child. On this experiment, they took groups of orphaned children and separated them into 3 groups. One was a control, the second were told they has a lips and were doing bad, and the third was told that their speech was perfect. As the experiment went on, group 2 began developing lisps after being berated constantly. They became shy and reserved. They were scared to speak because they didn't want to get in trouble because of their poor speaking skills. Group 3, however, had the opposite happen. They talked better, they were more willing to improve. They were encouraged to keep speaking and told that their speech was amazing and perfect. By the end of the experiment, they had one group with no change, one group with now mentally ill children with a speech impediment, and one group with great speaking skills. It truly shows that encouraging children is the way to go, and that verbal abuse can be just as, if not more, harmful as physical abuse. I'm late, but nobody has said it yet. The self-fulfilling prophecy studies are very important to social psychology, and their findings have many real-world applications. Basically, they brought together a group of kids and formed a class with a real teacher. They gave the kids a test for overall academic skill at the start of the course, but didn't really use the scores. Instead, they told the teachers that a few students, picked at random, were very brilliant and scores very highly. They then observed the class for a long period of time and noticed that the teachers gave the kids they thought were brilliant much more attention. At the end of the study, the kids took the test again, and they found that the kids who were randomly named brilliant at the start actually scores higher than the rest of the class. The kids, again, at the start didn't score any different from the rest of the class, but through the self-fulfilling prophecy they became the best in their class. This obviously has tons of application in the world and especially education. It's not that psychopaths lack empathy, but rather, they have the manual settings. A specific region of the brain lights up when people experience empathy. For most people it's an automatic, subconscious response. But in a study where they showed emotional videos to psychopaths and none, while scanning their brains, psychopaths would only light that region of the brain when specifically asked to feel for the character, while the controlled participants would light up automatically. White rats and black rats were raised separately without seeing each other. When a black rat was placed in the white rat's cage, the other rats ostracized him. When white and black rats are raised together, and a new black rat is placed in a cage, the white rats accept him. So basically rats are racist, unless raised to accept differences. The influence of the color red in sports. Judges were shown a video of a taekwondo match, and awarded more points to the red competitor, versus the blue competitor. When the colors were digitally reversed, judges awarded more points to the other, now red, competitor. Edit. Since there's a lot more interest than I expected, here's some more info. Red may be a signal of dominance, as reddened skin is associated with higher testosterone, or possibly higher fertility in women. Wearing red may induce intrinsic psychological effects which increase dominance in addition to altering the perception of others. Researchers found that putting red leg bands on birds increased dominant behavior, as they took the lion's share of the food. For my psychology degree dissertation, I presented photos of men, to be rated on a scale of friendly, 0, to threatening, 10. Men received a higher threat score if I photoshopped their t-shirt to be red. Not entirely sure it fits into the category, but the Rosenhan Experiment, 13 people feigned mental illnesses to get into mental hospitals and all were admitted with different diagnoses. They then assumed their normal personalities, but to be released they all had to admit that they were mentally ill. There was a second part where a hospital challenged Rosenhan to send multiple fake patients to the hospital and they would rate their patients on a scale of whether they think they were faking. They identified many possible fakers, but Rosenhan in fact hadn't sent anyone. I'm a huge fan of Milgram's small world experiment. It is more sociology than psychology, but I still think it is really cool. Milgram sends out 160 letters containing the name and address of a stockbroker in Boston to people in Omaha, Nebraska. They had to send it to someone they thought would get the letter closer, but they couldn't mail it directly to the stockbroker. Interestingly, most people that sent on the letter sent it onto the same group of people on the 5th degree. It only took 6 people, hence the 6 degrees of separation, to arrive, on average. It shows how interconnected our world is, even before the internet, which is happy to think about. Solomon Ash's experiment on conformity. He set up a test wherein he would show 3 lines of different lengths to 5 or 6 individuals, I forgot the exact number, who had to state which line was the longest of the 3. The thing is, only the last individual is the participant and the others are actors paid to answer in a specific manner. For the first few questions, they choose the correct answer, but later on they start choosing the wrong one. The participants are conflicted as to whether they will say the correct answer or conform to the wrong answer as to not be judged by others, or due to self-doubt of their own answers. In the end, most do conform. It's really interesting, since it shows how powerful conformity is in the face of doubt, up to a point that some even questioned their own sanity during the test. Another variation of the experiment also had interesting results. It had the same setup with 5 individuals, with the last person being the participant. However, this time some of the actors say the wrong answer, while one actor says the correct one. There was an increase in participants who would choose the correct answer and avoid conformity. It shows how much doubt one can have on oneself when alone, but be brought back to self-confidence when they find outside support.